welcome to an old school Monday Musing show, basically. So here I am, sat in the studio, just thinking through tonight's topic, which is what makes a good army. Nice open topic that I think hopefully gives everybody the chance to contribute in the chat and give me your opinions. So first up, let's do a sound check, make sure everybody's happy. We can see and hear you, says Coleman. Bless you, Coleman, you're a star. I've got my cup. Is it rude? My cup isn't rude. Although it does say I'd rather be cycling, which is not necessarily true. But there you go. Okay, what I want to do is to explore essentially the main theme, what makes a good army. But to do that, I'm going to be looking at it from a perspective of different types of gamers, because I think it makes sense that to answer kind of a broad question like what makes a good army, you have to think about, well, whose army is it and what are you intending to do with it? Because there are hobbyist armies which are very much about, creating projects for you to convert, paint, build, etc. And it becomes more of a collection than it does a playable piece. There are long-term gamers that essentially game a single faction for pretty much their whole life. It's the army they started with and it's the army they'll finish with. And, sometimes they span out into smaller factions, but at the end of the day, they are a lifelong collector of that faction. And predominantly most of their games will be, against their local gaming circuit. And then, of course, let's take it to the extreme where we've got the tournament players who are constantly chasing the latest meta, and not only into which faction is playing well in the tournament scene, but also right down to what units are playing well and replicating, the most efficient for points unit. And again, for them, that's a valid answer as well into what makes a good army. The reason I'm posing this question is because I've been asking it of myself. I'm sorry, I've got a hair in my eye. I've been asking it, not a lot of hair up there, but enough to get in my eye. I've been asking the question of myself lately into what I think constitutes making a good army for me, because it's not been an easy question for me to answer. My play style has been changing a lot recently. I have been enjoying the tournament scene more. I've been playing against more and more competitive lists and more competitive players, and I found myself getting dragged into into these highly efficient lists, which aren't necessarily what I would have constituted a good army in the past. And I've had a little bit of a rebound, I think, in my latest Beast of Chaos army. Whilst there is an element of a core 2,000 points that's highly efficient and highly playable, what I've done is use the excuse of Beast of Chaos's ability to summon to create some of the more hobby-based projects for me around that core of efficient playability. What I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into the chat, because the great thing was tonight a whole bunch of people were on the chat nice and early, giving me their opinion of what makes a good army. So I'm going to jump in the chat, have a quick review of that, and then we'll loop back round and explore some of those types of armies and players. So Martin Dix was in nice and early, and great in straight away in there with his opinion as well. I personally prefer Rule of Fluffy, or what's cool, like an entire Gretchen army or Penal Legion. So very much into like a conceptual idea. Like if you get an idea behind an army, wouldn't it be great to do an entire Gretchen army? Wouldn't it be great to do an entire Penal Legion? And interestingly enough, my Beast of Chaos army started by two models. It started with the Chaos Spawn, and then it started with an idea that was kindly given to me by Dan Bradshaw in terms of how you make your sacrificial Ungor unit work. And we'll come back around to that. Less of me, more of chat. Coleman, fluff, rule of cool. Without those, what else is there? Well, Coleman, we know you to be a hobbyist first and foremost. I've been desperately trying to get Coleman to come along to a tournament. I don't think it particularly appeals to you, does it, Coleman? But I'm trying my best. I'm trying my best to get you to come along. And you never know, maybe we can convince you to come along to a Game of Thrones or something like that. He makes a good point though. Rules changes, rules means lists, and lists can be replicated. To me, what makes an army great is making it interesting to you. Competitive play means meta chasing and changing armies. And there we have it. Straight away, both Martin, I think, and Coleman coming in from that kind of hobbyist perspective of not wanting to chase the meta. I think there's a couple of lessons I learned along the way, which we'll go into. You know what, let's go into it now with Fire Slayers, because I think that's a good place to start. My Fire Slayers army was an accidental army, so let's just get that out the way first. I believe Sam was going to do Fire Slayers, and he got a whole bunch of models, and I think this is what happened, and he basically decided, I think Luke, who you've seen on this show, made a joke about them looking like big angry babies in nappies. And aesthetically, it just puts Sam off the faction, I think. So he's like, I can't do Fire Slayers. That's it, I've abandoned them. And they kind of ended up on my desk as a faction to be done. So I accidentally fell into Fire Slayers when actually my original plan was a Caradron Overlord army. And I'm sure if you go back through enough of these videos, you'll see me ranting and raving about Caradron Overlords and how excited I am about them. But nevertheless, I bounced into Fire Slayers. And I very much wanted, when I built an army at that time, I saw the idea of a complete army. A good army was a complete army, and by complete I mean essentially representing, more or less every unit that's available to you in the battle tome, in the codex. Same with my Eldar. I wanted to be able to represent every single unit, and the idea is, in a friendly environment, you can try those units out. It's obvious that Guardians are nowhere near as good as Dire Avengers. That Dire Avengers are nowhere near as good as Wraithguard, and you can chase that meta into just showing up with all Wraithguard. Likewise with Fire Slayers, it was very clear to me that, and very quickly as well, that the power of Fire Slayers was about 30-man blocks of Volkite Berserkers. Dropping in with Rune Smiter. So, so powerful, just that much capability landing on the table, coming in 9 inches away from an opponent. But I didn't chase that. At a time when I think everybody was building large bots of Volkite Berserkers, I actually built 20 of each of the 3 builds. So, I mean, it's still a big block, 20, but it's not the minimum, which was 10. And it wasn't the maximum, which was 30. So I never had a 30 block of Volkite Berserkers. I had 20 of each of the builds, and that's the War Pick with shield, the Axe with shield, and then the double-handed axe. I had 2 units of Half-Guard Berserkers. Nobody was playing them, really. You just didn't see them on the table whatsoever, and they simply weren't worth the difference in points, because why ever would you take Half-Guard when there's Volkite Berserkers who are far more point efficient? And then, even more so, I actually built a bunch of Magmadroths at a time when you just never saw a Magmadroth on the table. And I have to say, I don't think I played a single Fire Slayer game without my Runefather on Magmadroth. Because to me, that made sense. He's the leader of the army, and if he's the leader of the army, he's going to ride around on a Magmadroth. So that's kind of what I built my whole army of. And within that army, I had full representation of all the units, basically. Even the terrible shooting ones were in that list. And it gave me a little bit of cushioning when the new book dropped. Because when the new book dropped, Volkite Berserkers, just came straight off the top of the pile. Magmadroths became better. And I've been experimenting with a list where they've been actually, I think, bordering on good. So I'm not going to say excellent, but they're good. And at the same time, all I had to do was basically add 2 boxes of Half-Guard Berserkers into my army to take them up to a unit of 10 each, which again, people are playing 30 blocks of Half-Guard Berserkers right now. But I think if by building that balanced army that was representative of most of the units, as and when the battle tomes and the codexes come out and they shift power from one wing to another, you don't feel the impact as much because you haven't gone all in on the high meta unit. You haven't got 90 Volkite Berserkers And I think some people were squeezing even 120 in or something like that. I can't quite remember how the list was going, but so it afforded you some protection from that. But there is a cost. Because if you are playing against highly competitive friends, or if you're playing in a competitive scene, you haven't got an optimized army. I think classically, as I've got to know the tournament scene a little bit more, you go 3-2. If you've learnt the army, I think that's the thing, is even a relatively poor list, if you know your army really well, you can kind of go 3-2 over the 5 games. So 3 wins, 2 losses. You might go 2 wins, a draw, and 2 losses, or something like that. So to get into that 4-1 and 5-0, that's where you've got to really start to change what the army is about and what you're trying to achieve with that army. So there's a little example of coming from, I think, like Coleman and like Martin, they're coming from like the fluffy background of saying, no, because my Fire Slayer list is about a Runefather, and he's on a Magmadroth, and he's got some sons on Magmadroths, and there's a bunch of dudes that all come along, and they're the guards that guard the Runefathers, so they've got to be there. And kind of building it based on the fluff of the army. But Derpimus Maximus does come in there and says fluff changes too, though. I mean, GW have exploded a world or two. Yep, fluffy armies are not without their perils, as Tomb Kings and Bretonnians found out as well. But saying that, good news is the old world is coming back, so keep those armies in the box, you'll be fine. What else we got in the chat? Let's just have a quick flip down before we kind of explore a couple more themes. Wow, Sean Blake says, nice. Martin Dick says, Coleman, I agree. I read stories and fluff, and some units just fall stupid short of actual power. Yeah, without a doubt. Thordalim says, good evening. Good evening, Thordalim. Sean is missing Sam. We all miss Sam, but he doesn't live anywhere near here anymore. But I think he's going to try and get on a couple of shows every now and then. He did join a couple, but he doesn't have a dedicated hobby space right now. It's something that he's working on, and no doubt probably myself and Luke might get roped into helping get that dedicated hobby space up and running as well. Sam, the offer's there, it is. What's that? Big zombie blocks were always just funny. Jack Morton said, you did have a unit of 30. Trust me, I remember having to try and mow through them. Okay, you've spoiled the magic. I had one unit of 30, which immediately got repurposed, actually. And that unit was built for a tournament. It was the only way we could make a 1,000-point list work. So there was a bunch of arm snappings and remodelings of 10 dudes. Trying to make myself sound like a nice guy. Nice one, Jack. Martin says he always loses. And now you know why you're not live on the stream, says Coleman to Jack. Yeah, well, he's always going to do that to me, isn't he? Because that's Jack. Marvellous. Let's not talk about some of your lists, hey, Jack. So, let's get into some of the other aspects, then, of what makes a good army. Oh, Dave's just come in. Dave Dog says, let's be honest with ourselves. A strong and varied greenskin army is aesthetically the best. You know what? The greenskins at the moment, they are definitely pushing up towards the top of the meta, aren't they? So there's some amazing stuff you can do with the Auric list. Always more DACA, but are you talking probably about 40k? In which case, yeah, I agree with you. Anyway, they have got the greenskins have got the best vehicles by far, especially with the new buggies and stuff. I mean, whether they're playable or not, but they're definitely cool looking. Right, okay. I should fetch you the burn balm. Okay, let's get off the chat for a bit and explore this good army theme again. So we've talked a little bit about, from a fluff perspective, what makes a good army, I think, is going through the battle tome or the codex and looking for a narrative key, something that unlocks your imagination into why you'd want to build that army or do that army. So for me, interestingly enough, although Beast of Chaos hadn't really appealed to me, I was fortunate enough to attend the latest Throne of School doubles with Dan Bradshaw, who was gracious enough to stand in as a partner for me last minute, and we had a lot of fun with his Beast of Chaos list. And it got, and I prepared a few units for him. So I built these Chaos Spawn, which I wanted to be kind of funky little cool dudes. And I wanted to contribute to Dan's army in some way because I had no time to get ready for it. Basically, I was working a lot. You know, I wanted to contribute in some way to the army. And you know, and we had a great time. It was a highly competitive list. I think if I remember rightly, we went 5-0. So you know, but we came ninth in the tournament. So that's an interesting thing, isn't it? There we are, looking happy as pie. That's a terrible photo, by the way. He'll not forgive me for showing that, will he? If anybody has not listened to Stormcast, this week's Stormcast, Dan is actually on there because Dan won the Masters this year and is officially the UK's best Warhammer, in fact the world's best Warhammer player, I think that's how it works. Who knows? I don't know. He's a very humble guy, so he didn't talk about it much. We just had some fun over the weekend playing Beasts of Chaos. But he is on the latest Stormcast, and he does talk about, for him, what makes a good army. And, you know, I'll come into that a little bit because he talks about this triumvirate of, looking at units in a certain way, which I think is quite interesting. But back to that kind of narrative stance then, I started off, I had, these Chaos Spawn, which were kind of Zeech based because there was a whole bunch of Zangor in the list that we were going for. And I got the Beasts of Chaos Battle Tome because I wanted to kind of brush up on the army and understand it more. And I found one section on Twist Phrase. You know, I mean, the book's pretty good. The background, the fluff, it's great stuff. I really like how... In fact, I might even do a Beasts of Chaos lore video at some point because I really like the idea that, you know, there's a kind of rumour or a belief that Beasts of Chaos predate the Chaos Gods. You know, they're just chaotic in their nature without any particular allegiance. And, it may have even been the Beasts of Chaos and their worship of chaos as a generic thing which brought about the existence of the Chaos Gods. So I love the fact that they've, you know, there are elements of Beasts of Chaos in there that remind me of some of the Dungeons and Dragons where you could be chaotic evil and chaotic good, you know. And in that story is the story of an entire Beasts of Chaos tribe that essentially embraced the human side of them, given up a lot of the bestial behaviour, and was living in perfect harmony alongside a whole bunch of human settlements and elves, and, you know, just getting on fine, and, you know, libraries and all that kind of stuff. And along came Sigmar, and Sigmar went, no, you're no good. You've got a chaos tint to you, so we're going to just completely wipe you out. And they wiped out this Beast of Chaos tribe, leaving just one remaining hero, basically, who cut a deal with Zeech, basically transmuted the vast quantities of the elves and men within the realm back into a Zeechian Beast of Chaos army, which led me to a section reading up on Twist Phrase. So the idea of the Twist Phrase is the Beasts of Chaos that are particularly aligned to Zeech. And it's that one or two paragraphs that provided the key for me for a narrative behind an army, which was to say, let's find the unit that is the most iconic of the Zeechian Beasts of Chaos, which is simple. That's the Zangors. You know, they are Gors. They are like the Young Gors and the Bestigors and all the rest. Zangors are indeed beastmen. They're just avian-looking beastmen because they've gone down the rather avian aesthetic of Zeech. So I didn't feel like I needed to do anything with that unit because it's so iconic to what you would expect to find from a Zeech army. But it got me into a tract of, well, what would everything else look like? What would it look like for a Twist Fray to be? What would the Ungors look like? What would the Bestigors look like? And and that's led me down a path of all these millions of conversions and all the rest. And interestingly enough, again, I've still kind of fallen into that narrative army build, the idea of sort of trying to illustrate in some way what a large Beast of Chaos faction army would look like when it's devoted itself utterly to Zeech. So that's affected what my Herdstone looks like, it affects what my units look like, it affects what my Beast Lord looks like. My chariots, instead of having wheels and being pulled by shaggy beasts with tusks, the Tuskor chariot, my chariots are actually flying Zeech discs pulled by the flappy chicken creatures out of the Warcry set, because I'm going with that whole aesthetic. So to me, it makes a good army. It makes a good army because I'm enjoying the hobby project and I'm enjoying the nature of doing all of these conversions and reimagining, elements of the faction. So what does the Gorgon look like when it's Zeechian? well, I'll show you one day because I'm working on the conversion. But also, and I think this is where the change for me has been recently, is I'm also working with an eye on the competitive scene. I'm thinking, what out of this build, what is point efficient, what is really good in terms of what it actually does on the table. Does it have great rules attached to it? Does it work well in terms of the points, and does it have great synergies with the other faction? So there are, there is a large crowd of Ungors in there. I've not just minned them out there at the sort of units of 10 just to get over the battle line. I've got a unit of 40 in there, which is quite, it's quite a powerful unit. It's not a game changer, but it's really hard to churn through, and it hits on 4s and re-rolls 1s and 2s and things like that. And there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with movement around it. And at the same time, though, there's still this core of a Zangor unit, but I've also gone on to add Skyfires and I want to say Enchanted, Exalted, Enlightened. It's one of those words, isn't it? So I've also added a unit of Enlighten in there, and I think if it was down to me before, I'd have probably done a unit of 3 of each, where I've done a unit of 6 of each. Now, you can kind of take them up to 9 if you want, and in fact, I think you can even take them to 12, but I've not gone that far. I've still... It enables me when I'm looking at the Throne of Skulls that are coming up in February, or more likely they're going to be used in June for the Doubles Army. I'm looking at what can I achieve within 1,000 points, what's really effective, and 6 Enlightened within 1,000 points is actually quite an effective unit, and yet it still appeals to me from an aesthetic point of view. I'm going to catch up on a little bit of the chat, and then we're just going to explore the idea of a good army in a competitive sense. So, whoa, a bunch of stuff on the chat. DJ the Lucky One saying hi, the Blood saying hey man. Sick background, by the way, thank you very much. This is actually my Mechanicus sector Mechanicus terrain, which I took some close cameras of. If there are Bestigors, should there also be Worstigors? Yes, Worstigors are Ungors, because they are undeniably terrible. Sleep tight, says Bladder. Oh, that's Martin Dix off to bed. He'll watch the rest tomorrow. Good night, sir. And go Zeech. I'm 100% Zeechy. I just love the demons. Lore, to be honest, I've been totally sold since I cast Eye on the Battle Tome, and I've been amassing an army ever since. Really hoping to see this army at next year's Doubles. Yes, I think it's probably going to end up at next year's Doubles for sure. I think that's what I'm targeting, because I've taken a slight diversion at for the Throne of Skulls in February, which is the escalation tournament play. It's probably going to be Fire Slayers for that, because I've been working on these crazy fellows, which are a converted version of the evocators. So as you can see, I'm still doing a lot of work to that, but I think I've just about got the tail right on that side, and I'm kind of doing some little texture bits down here which need blending in and stuff like that. And then I've just got to work out how to create a little seat for these fellows, and we'll come back to the thinking behind those, because it has some relevance later to trying to maintain, if you like, a fluffy feel to the army, even if you are going down the route of competitive additions through allies. How about that? Maybe that's a good segue into it, really. Zeech are amazing. I don't know why I haven't done Zeech before, to be honest. I bought a start collecting sets for Zeech some time ago, got really excited about it, and then put them to one side. And I'm glad to be back doing them now. I'm sat looking with some pride at what I've achieved over the last few weeks, because, I'm just going to give you an example of this. Wow! If I can reach this, can I reach that? There you go. Is this going to show? That is, how's that? Wow. Okay, there you go. So that is 80. No, there's 40 Ungors there. 20 archers. Oh no, they're all the sword and shield guys. So that's the unit of 40 Ungors, all converted with their swords and shields. And for those of you who remember last week's show, I was working on the idea of the test paint scheme for them. So as you can see, I think I've pretty much settled on that one with a few variations on it, but that's the route I'm going to go for the unit. And all I've got to do now is replicate that not only 40 times but 80 times, because I've also got 20 archers and another 2 units of 10 to add later. So yeah, I hope you see it in the doubles, because that means I will have finished it. Otherwise I'll be showing up with Fire Slayers again. That's happened before. Okay, I want to we're 9:25, and I think this is going to be about a 45-minute show. So I think in the second half I just want to go into exploring a little bit around the idea of a competitive army. What makes a good competitive army? And it's something that was covered on the latest Stormcast podcast, which, you know, covered 3 things, and it was kind of like, you know, is it point efficient, is it fun to play, and I have no idea what the other one was, which is really bad, but I've gone blank. I'll come back to that. Why can't I remember the third thing? Doesn't really matter. I think from my perspective, when you get into the tournament list, there's a few things that I've encountered, and you know, Luke's great at building these incredible incredible armies, and using to great effect the allowance for allies. So for instance, in a list that he built recently and I played against, this is a heavy corn army, so a whole bunch of corn. I'm not going to go into the list in particular because I think he's developing it for a tournament, and I don't know whether he'd be pleased if I gave away what's exactly in the list right now. But he's probably copied it off the internet anyway. I've just said that because I know Luke will tune into this at some point. But what he added to that was a unit of Enlightened. So you've got this unit of Enlightened Zeech right in the middle of a corn army. And I think what I've kind of picked up from him recently is to be a little bit more relaxed about those kind of things. And I'll come back to how he achieves it aesthetically, as opposed to just simply going out there and buying 3 Enlightened and painting them red or something, which, to be honest, probably get away with. I really like the idea that in the Sigmar world, at least, and I think they're doing this in 40k now, is the idea of being able to kind of customize your armies. From a Sigmar sense, that's about thinking about the realm. So you can have a Fire Slayer army that's actually from the realm of metal, so they're not all fiery colours, they're all metallic colours. You can have a Tyranid faction, the latest announcements around Tyranids, where you can do a lot of customization. You can have all of your heroes with camouflage, so they could all be like merging into the terrain around them and stuff like that. So it enables you to kind of customize your armies much more. I think really what I've learned from Luke in seeing some of his latest lists is to kind of take that a step further and say that Fire Slayers is a good example. If you've seen my pre Fire Slayer release show, I was on a chat with Coleman. I bet this coffee's gone terribly cold. Yep, that's really cold. So I was on the chat and I was saying the one thing I think we agreed. The one thing we both really felt is it'd be nice to have a kind of a heavy cavalry unit for the Fire Slayers, something in between the Magma Drop, which hits really hard, but and a bit more mobile than the big units, the big blocks of units. And even though you could use the tunnel into great effect to add mobility to your army, the reality is with the increase of the points of the Rune Priest, it's not a Rune Priest, either way, the dude that makes them teleport, it's quite a tax on top of the unit just to gain mobility. So it didn't happen. We didn't get a heavy cavalry unit. We did get a much more balanced book for Fire Slayers, without a doubt, and I've been using, my average Magma Drop count in a list right now, I would say, is 3. Sometimes I take 4, sometimes I take 2, but I'm pretty much averaging around Runefather Magma Drop and 2 Rune Suns on Magma Drop. I really like the way how the Rune Suns work together. I like the mobility the Magma Drop gives, and the survivability the Magma Drop gives your Runefather. But I still felt like I was missing one of those units. So I took a leaf out of Luke's book really, and started to look through the allies to say, well, is there a unit out there that kind of ticks that box of heavy cavalry, that I could kind of take an approach that say Luke did for his for well, at the time he was working on his Iden of Deepkin, which I don't know whether you've seen that. He recently, along with Sam, won the recent Throne of Skulls doubles with that, and they also won Best Army as well. So his conversion is a whole bunch of the eels and things like that with ghosts kind of floating on top, all done in that absolutely gorgeous Series D brushwork. These things, the Opus Series D. If you haven't tried those, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, you need to check out some reviews on those things and see how they're done and get your orders in for them, because they definitely are quite interesting. Especially, I think, I've seen them used on things like Tau and stuff, and they just look amazing. So Luke had been working on that. He wanted to add some Kurnoth Hunters. He put Kurnoth Hunters in, but what he did was get a whole bunch of Iden of Deepkin armor and stuff and kind of layered it up on them, so they kind of knitted in with his army a little bit better. I think when it came to his Khorne army, he kind of took it a stage further. Rather than enlightened, he got a bunch of Forge World demons with wings, and of course they've got the fly rule. That's cool. They had the combat, so he gave them a weapon that looks familiar, and they become a very Khorne featured proxy for an ally. Now, of course, you're proxying models, so you do need to discuss it with any tournament you're going to. You also need to discuss it and make it clear to your opponent that is indeed a Zangor Enlightened. So when you look at this very Khorne demon looking model, you do have to think Zangor Enlightened. And I think so far, when people see what you're trying to do to create a really cool looking army, a really good army, then for the vast majority, and in fact actually 100% of players, nobody has complained that says, I'm confused about what your army is. You're there, you're playing opposite the table, you can talk it through with them, and you can make it clear to them what there is. And I think as soon as that realization grew on me that there was more creative freedom for my army, strangely enough, it made me, like say, revisit the Fire Slayers, and I was thinking, can it be achieved? So you start looking through the allies for Fire Slayers. One of the big ally groups is obviously Stormcast Eternals. You go through the Stormcast Eternals, and lo and behold, look at what I discover. I discover the wonderful little, oh, that doesn't work, 'cause he's got green stuff on him. Oh, that's a bit strange, really, isn't it? How does that work? Let me see if I can zoom in on this a little bit, just so you can see what I've been trying to do. There you go. So you get the idea. Look, sort of, in fact, actually, that side's better because it's had a little bit more work on the tail to kind of get that right. It just needs a little bit of sanding and stuff like that. So I'm going to build / probably design and 3D print some kind of little seat for my dwarves to go on. But as you can see, this is indeed a Dracoline. It's based on the Dracoline model. 9/10 of it is a Dracoline model right down to there. This is off spare Magmadroth tails and stuff like that. Yes, you do get some spare bits, so you get spare frills and stuff between the different ones. And I was fortunate enough to have 2 spare Magmadroth tails that came in a spares box that I had. So I had enough to do this Dracoline unit. And again, there's green stuff work to be done. This is very much work in progress. This is just positioned on. It's not blended in or anything. And in fact, it's not even glued on. I can actually peel it off. It's just setting in place at the moment, because what it does is bring in some of this texture from the Magmadroth. So this was done by merit of a little press mold into the Magmadroth flank to bring that rib in. But you can see what I'm trying to do. I'm creating a mini Magmadroth, basically, and on that mini Magmadroth is going to be a Fire Slayer hero. The only thing I need to do really is to make sure that when you look at the model, you go, that is a Dracoline. I can still see it's a Dracoline. It's on the right base for a Dracoline. Oh no, you've just ruined it for me, Dave. Okay, so it's on the right base, and when you look at what I've got to be careful with when I put the dwarf on it is to not use any weapon that you would see out of the Fire Slayer book, because I don't want you to look at it and go, well, that's a Grand Latchkey, or that's the Javelin, or whatever, that's a War Pick. You need to be able to look at it and say, well, it's none of the weapons they already have, and therefore the kind of proxy makes a little bit more sense. The good news is what's this done is, of course, is in that ally contingent, it's added me that fast moving unit. It's also given me access to a couple of dispel and unbinds, and it, so it's also given me something that, from a competitive point of view, the Fire Slayers lack. Right, at some point I am going to have to cover Dave's comment, as terrifying as it might be. They might get Fire Slayers right on the next one, says Coleman. I think Fire Slayers are good. I'm okay with it. There's a couple of tweaks that you need in there, let's face it. Those half guard need something doing to them to limit them. And Volkites tipped one way too far, but I discussed that in the Codex review. I felt they'd gone too powerful with the half guard, and they'd been too punishing to the Volkites. That's basically all that needs addressing in that book, and I think I've been working quite hard to play an army. Well, we'll come back to that, because there's one thing about I think playing it informs whether an army is good or not. But that's another. We'll come back to that. Underdog paintings in there. Hello guys, hope everyone's well. Yes, I am. Thank you, Mr. Underdog. I'm going to get in on the Age of Sigmar next year with Blades of Khorne. Good choice. Good choice. Blades of Khorne is a gorgeous army. You'll have a lot of fun with it. Dave says, are you in Nottingham? Is it worth going to Warhammer World if I can get cheap tickets from Malaga? Coleman's not in Nottingham, but he's not far from Nottingham. He probably thinks he's far from Nottingham, but he isn't really. I'm not far from Nottingham. We can be there in about an hour, basically. So if you were ever coming over, we could arrange a meet. I'm absolutely sure. Bear in mind that Jack is at university in Nottingham, so at the very least he'd give you a game. Gore Chosen box, so just painting them up now, says Underdog. Oh, so nice. Gore Chosen are great models. Bluffer says, what do you guys think about Warhammer the Old World? Okay, come back to that at the end of the show. And Bluffer says, far a little bit about this stage, let's wait for more details. And somewhere in there, and luckily enough, I think I've managed to skip over it. Someone did comment that my conversion looks a little bit like the cat from Thundercats. It so is, isn't it? I've accidentally made the Thundercats. Okay, thanks for that. They're going in the bin. Coleman says, don't get me started. Will be nerfed, so you will buy a new mini. I'm not quite sure what Dave's referring to there. Oh, it's going to be awesome because I reckon you can now use 8th edition plastic minis in War. Yeah, and they'll be nerfed. Probably Age of Sigmar like rules with more mandatory rank and file rules. Yeah, well, we'll come back to that. It's 3 years off. It's an early announcement, and we talked about it a little bit. Let's loop back around to that one last thing about what makes a good army, because I think it's probably the most underexplored aspect of what makes a good army. I think what makes you, I'm going to tip it on its head a little bit. What makes your army good is giving it a decent amount of play time. You really need to play it, and really refine the list. And you can do it in two ways. You can refine it in a direction that takes it in, I enjoy playing this, and more importantly, it is enjoyable to play against. Another big theme there. Or you can play it in terms of optimization until this arm, the unit choice I've made, I've played and explored it until I believe I've refined the most optimized, point efficient, competitive list out of the units I have available to me. Both of those are fine, and not necessarily exclusive to each other either. I think the important thing is just remember to play your army. I know the collection element is a lot of people jump armies quite quickly as soon as they finish painting an army. Especially if they're focused on the hobby, they more or less move on to a new army. And and I've done that. I've got 3,000 points of Sylvaneth, which haven't seen the table, I'd say, in probably around about, I'm guessing, but I'd say about 12 months. My brother came to visit recently, and he's never played Age of Sigmar before, so we got the Sylvaneth down. He was always a big elf fan from Fantasy Times and Wood Elves, and in fact all factions of elves. So we got the Sylvaneth down, and he gave it a play. It was actually a really enjoyable game, and there's some fun twists and tweaks in that in the Sylvaneth book. I mean, it's not top tier by any means, but I think it's a little bit more interesting to play against and to play with as well. And we pitched that against a kind of a mixed batch of Fire Slayers. So anyway, we had a good fun game. But I think the important thing is, I think again, when you immediately make some decisions around what makes up the most competitive unit, you tend to time after time after time only ever bring those units to the table because they work. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Whereas I think when you're playing against a smaller group of people, and you yourself want to put some variety into the play, you start to explore the other units. And I have to say, with the latest Fire Slayer book, it's the only reason I'm playing with like 3 or 4 Magmadroths at the moment is because I've forced myself to try it and just not go out and buy 2 more Halfguard boxes. Because I've forced myself to try and find those synergies and to find a battle plan and a deployment that works well across multiple scenarios as well. So if I'm playing, shifting objectives, I've got an idea what my deployment's going to look like for that. The taken hold kind of scenarios as well. I've got an idea what I want to try and achieve in the first 2 turns with a list that most people probably haven't seen before. They don't expect to see 4 Magmadroths on the table, so it gets everybody you're going up against second guessing, what do I do against this thing? Is it good or is it bad? Whatever exactly. So I do think taking the time and investing into playing your army multiple times with multiple builds, and whilst there are definitely people out there that can look at a book and within seconds, and Jack's one of these people. I think Luke is Luke's definitely one of these people. You can look at a book and explore it, and over a period of time find what Luke's like to call the one list in that book that is the best list. He's always searching for it, and it's good fun to kind of go backwards and forwards as you explore those different lists and the different units and the different combinations. I do enjoy it, but at the same time I think it's quite nice to go, well, you know what, I know this isn't the one, but I'm going to play it and see if I can learn to play it so well in the context of the scenarios that the fact that the army isn't OP, to crudely use a term, I can still win with it, and I win with it by knowing its abilities really well. I think what you find is, as you play an army in that context, it's just less forgiving of mistakes. That's the thing you're sacrificing, and because it's not as good, and if you make a mistake, the entire army can fold around you, basically. So that's where practice comes in, because the more you practice with the army, the less mistakes you make, the more of your rules you remember, which is a big part of an army being quite good. If you forget that, to keep your 2 Rune Sons within 6 inches of each other when they go into combat and they lose the reroll hits, that's a big deal, because that unit is nowhere near as powerful without the reroll hits. Okay, what have we got in the chat? The Bladder says, if it's broken, use it. Competitive mindset. It kind of is. You look at it and you find that one unit, don't you? And then you fit that unit in as many times as possible. I mean, what's interesting is the one thing I have discovered the more I've played the competitive scene is that's definitely there. There's no denying it's definitely there. But there's also a great deal of players that are, interjecting that list with, yeah, but it's just not fun to play. And I want to have fun. I want to win, but I also want to have fun when I win. I just don't want to show up and break a tournament by, nobody having any fun against me whatsoever. And strangely enough, that probably brings me in a full circle back to what I was saying, which is in my Beasts of Chaos army, I have added units that are definitely suboptimal, but they're available to me relatively cheaply within the summoning. So if I'm having a game and I'm doing quite well in turns 1, 2 and 3, then why bother summoning even more powerful nonsense in? I mean, there are some games you can pretty much if you've got your battle plan tied down, you pretty much know whether you've won or not, say turn 2 or turn 3, you know. And I'm not saying it doesn't turn, because the tide can turn and you can have some bad rolls, you have a bad turn. But you've got a sense of whether you've achieved what you were trying to achieve in the mission. If you feel you've got enough points in the bag or you've got enough presence on the table, well then why summon, you know, why summon 3 Enlightened in? Why not bring in a fun unit? Why not bring in, you know, a couple of Tuskor chariots just for the fun? They may get smashed off the table because they're not that great, but isn't that a little bit of late game fun for your opponent as well? You know, just you're actually playing the game rather than just locking each other's armies down into you know, non-competitiveness. It's like, well, there's nothing I can do here, so let's just shake hands now at the turn of turn 3. You know, I'd rather there be a game still to play. Sisters of BattleBots comes out this Saturday, right? That is indeed true. So if you missed out on pre-orders, you need to get down your Games Workshop, your local Games Workshop, or your local store if they manage to get over of them. From what I understand, there is no stores out there that are going to receive more than single figures. Could be wrong, but I think that's the general noise I'm getting. So you're going to need to be in the top few of the doorway if you really desperately want that box set. I want one, but I also need to be visiting my son on Saturday, so there's no way I'm going to be stood outside the Games Workshop first thing in the morning. Could be stood outside Warhammer World though, but I bet the queue's massive. I've pre-ordered in a cunning fashion, and a promise is a promise from my local shop. Well, good luck, sir. I hope it works for you. Sisters of Battle, really nice. They are. I'm looking forward to the Rule Codex review. It'll be interesting actually, because at the moment, right now, it's only the limited edition sets out, isn't it? We'll see the release as it comes through. Excuse me, I haven't seen the book. Maybe that yawn is time for me to say it's time to say goodnight, so I've got to get on the train early tomorrow morning and dive away. Well, I hope you've enjoyed. Oh, Twisted Bishops just come in. I thought what makes a great army is if it fits inside a single KR multi-case. There's a little bit of Samism, isn't there? Perfect, yeah. Sam, one of the biggest choices for Sam was, can it fit inside a single KR multi-case? If you could make that happen, he was onto a winner. He's moved on, I think, from KR. He's all about his magnetic boxes now, so, you know, but that's freed his mind a little bit. Does it fit inside his box? Job done. Why does no one play with an all Noblar army? I guess we have Gleam Spike hits. Be good to see though, wouldn't it? I'm not a fan of fragile miniatures. Well, Dave, like I say, I mean, for me, that's where I've become the ultimate fan of magnetized transportation, because to be honest, the amount of times I lost spiky bits of miniatures to foam, I'll never go back, I think, to foam-based transportation. I know from taking them on a plane and all the rest, that's probably the way to go, but I'd rather take two small carry-on cases, knowing that my arm is magnetized and safe, and handling it than checking it into, say, an airport or something like that. But that doesn't apply to all armies, but certainly the way a lot of Games Workshop sculpts have gone, the technology has afforded them to make these wonderfully detailed, wonderfully agile models, which are also, by the very merit, quite fragile as well. So you need to be careful in terms of transporting them. Right, I'm going to call it a night, folks. 48 minutes, that'll do for tonight, won't it? And it was nice to do a good old classic Monday musing again. I hope you enjoyed it. Comments on below, and I will find time to come back and reply to all of the comments. What do you think makes a useful army? It might be something to revisit in 6 months' time if people make enough comments. I'd like to go back over it for sure. And again, my opinion's changed over the last 6 months, so who's to say it's not to change again? Don't forget to like and subscribe. I haven't done that for a long time, but I might as well say it. And also, if you haven't been there, please go over and visit wargameronline.com, where if you want to support our efforts to do more of this, then there is the ability to sign up to a premium account, which for only $2.99 a month means we get some support from you guys to keep going. Alright, thank you all, and we'll see you again soon as I can find the end credits button.